So I got involved with a non-violent political Islamist organization. And their dream was, let's have a world where Muslims take back control of the power. We get rid of the colonized mentality and colonialism. We take back our leadership. We become great again. That's the thing about extremists. They a lot of what they say, like we have this 90-10 truth. Like a lot of what they say is positive and good and attractive. And then the last bit is you have to have the blame game. Knowledge is power. People cannot take you for a ride if you know the tricks. You need to show up the devil in his full form and say, this is what it looks like, guys. Don't be fooled. If you want to spread something, you have to have all of these things. And I saw it, I lived it, I breathed it, I was part of it. And now, thank you very much. I have that knowledge and I'm going to do something with it.
Hi, my name is Nikola Ilic, and I will be your host at the Pulse of Change podcast. As an activist and a professor of leadership, I really wanted to create space where we can explore with our guests this intersection between leadership, democracy, and personal change. We will have many guests from activists to change makers, artists, and so forth. People who really acted upon their values and sacrificed something for what they believed in. In today's episode of Pulse of Change, I got to talk with a woman whose life reads like a spy thriller, but carries the weight of real-world consequences. Our guest is Hadiya Masieh, who was recruited by the radical Islamist group while she was in university. For several years, she immersed herself in their extremist ideology before experiencing a profound transformation after the 2005 London bombings. What follows is remarkable redemption story. The extremist recruit transformed into a trusted advisor to Prime Minister Gordon Brown's government. She also is a founder of Groundswell Project and today one of the world's most sought-after experts on countering violent extremism. Raised in the UK with Caribbean and Indian heritage, a mother of four, Hadiya offers unique insights as someone who experienced both extremism and redemption. Her journey raises crucial questions about radicalization, but also about personal transformation and change. Hadiya, I'm so happy to have you at Pulse of Change podcast. This is where we want to talk to people like you who have extraordinary experiences. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I really wanted to talk to you. I want to have this conversation. When I started learning about you and who you are, and as I told you, I went down the rabbit hole, I was blown away by your story, and I got inspired because it is a story of overcoming many things, but at the same time, it's a story of then you helping others to overcome what you had to deal with. So if you don't mind, can we start there? Can we start from the very, very beginning? In one of the videos that they watched about you, you said that you were not a typical profile of those who would end up joining an organization that's portrayed as extremist organization. Because you grew up in Yorkshire, in not very religious family, you have Hindu background, you went to good university, which I also want to say it's a reminder that, these things can happen to anyone, right? Depending on many things in your life. But tell us a bit, how did you go from not being very religious and even disliking, as you said in one of the things I watched, the religion, to becoming quite religious and then even joining this organization that we can portray it as a extreme organization?
Yeah, so that's a good summary of my background. That I came from a Hindu family who were actually, just getting by. They were immigrants, but from the faith, people from the faith itself were quite anti-Muslim. So I was quite anti-Muslim, and also because of the Hindu-Muslim conflict in India, there's like tensions, and then I was listening to a lot of the media as well around Muslim countries, and I just had a very negative opinion of Muslims and Islam. And then when I started to get to university, I met different people from different faiths and backgrounds, and I was like, hang on a minute, it's not really good to just judge a faith like that. I'm going to do some research of my own. And I picked up a book, and it was completely like different and not anything like the media talks about. It's very spiritual, and it started having this strange impact on me where I was like getting very much interested in like in the spirituality of it all. And I kind of shocked myself. I was like, I need to put this book down because it's getting too like intense, and I'm starting to like have feelings for Islam. Like it was like, when you're falling in love with a person and you're like, oh wow, I'm really starting to see this in a different light. And then, I had a very spiritual experience, and I was like, I really want to convert to Islam against all odds and against my family and all that. So it was a very pulling thing that I almost had no choice about.
What did you find in that book that spoke to you?
Back then, we used to go to a library. They had these books in the library. We didn't have the online world. There's my children find it funny that I had to go and research things in a library when I was at school, and now everything's just, we used to have that big encyclopedias, and now everything's online. So yeah, I was just in the library and I just got a book. It was called Prophet, and it was by Martin Lings. He was a Sufi convert to Islam, and he wrote beautifully. And so I was just very drawn. And yeah, it was one of those things it was a very big heart pull to the faith, and I converted. So yeah.
So that's the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
And then looking back, what was about that organization? And I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name, Hizb ut-Tahrir, right?
Mm-hmm.
At one point you decided to go further and to join this organization. What initially attracted you? How does one become seduced or attracted to that idea of joining an organization that, and did you know at the beginning what you're getting into? So I guess first, what drew you to it, and then how did you discover? What did you see inside?
So the situation is you are a young person trying to find your way in the world. That's not new. Every young person's trying to find their feet, who they are, where they're from. I had a spiritual experience that drove me to want to discover more about Islam. And it was, at that point, the family situation, because I was more quite extremist Hindu at one point, maybe there's a running theme here, but, I was quite politicized and political. I joined Amnesty International at school. So political situations were very much part of my interest. So I was already interested in the space. Then I had obviously a spiritual experience. When you're like new and you're vulnerable to like in that space where you don't really know very much, you just want to go find out. And people who were quite vocal were very political. They were Muslim and they were political. So I was like, oh, this is both. Like, I like politics and I like this, this new religion. And I was very, even prior to that, interested in the injustices in the world and things that were going on that were not right. So they had a very good narrative for someone new to faith. And anyone will tell you if they've converted to something new, they get really into it. Like it's a thing, the passion of the convert. And I was a bit infected with that. I was young, I had found a new passion. As I was talking about politics, I was talking about faith, and I was in a space that I was really like, enthused. So I got involved with a non-violent political Islamist organization. And their dream was, let's have a world where Muslims take back control of the power. We get rid of the colonized, mentality and the colonialism. We take back our leadership. we become great again. We, offer the world something as good as it used to be. Like, this, where did algebra come from? Where did the mathematicians, where did the best philosophers come from? So this kind of utopia golden age, like we've lost it because we've been, we're under the oppression of regimes that don't really want us to flourish. And this was just like such an idealistic way of thinking. Like, we can, regain our power and take control. They only, European Western countries just want to take. We have so much, we can take it back. So it was this idealistic political concept of, almost like they call like Hizb ut-Tahrir communist Islam, because
Communist Islam.
The founders were from Palestine.
Mm.
And so they're in an area of conflict, and they're very much influenced by Ba'athist and communist type.
Okay.
So they married the two, and then you got the Liberation Party. So you're 19, you're ready to, you want to change the world. You've got all these ideas. You're an idealist, and again, that's not really uncommon. So I was just caught up in that.
Oh, that's so interesting, because what I'm hearing you saying is that you were a woman who was informed about injustices around the world, and it sounds like you're trying to find your place into the fight for the better world. And it seems
like spiritual motivation plus my already existing sadness for the world.
Yeah.
When it's suffering, and I think when we met, I was telling you how Bosnia and Kosovo and that particular area of the world was really problematic, and I'm an empath, so I just felt, and anyone, it's not just anyone as a human being saw that on the news would feel devastated. And then I'm like, oh, this is because I'm being taught with my new, friends who are talking political things, that this is because, Western nations have meddled in this space and not interested in Muslims or in Islam. They want, they want to destroy it. They want to get rid of it. If they could have their way, they would destroy the whole of the Muslim world. And I really believed that, because everything I looked at was like, oh yeah, they're attacking there and they're attacking there. And it seemed to like ring a truth in that, what they were saying. And I was like, well, who's going to look after them? Who's going to protect them? We need to protect them. We need to gain control. And, it was, can we do this? And the people saying, yes, we can do it. And we must do it. It's part of your faith to do it. So it's like, skewed. It's using my passion for faith to also drive my political drive as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you tell me, because I hear stories similar to this, where people join movements because they give them purpose and community, and then sense of belonging and sense that now you matter, and then you can do something about the injustices that you have. And it's interesting how you could have gone many different paths depending on what was offered to you, right?
Yeah.
Or how did they find you? I just wonder, how did that happen? How did you, because that narrative sounds very appealing. Hey, we actually want to do good in the world, and
we want to change the status quo. We want to, we want to bring it back. We want to take back control and power.
Yeah. And they're using the narrative of, and some people don't know, but there was a period, particularly in the Middle East, between, I think, 7th and 9th century, where science and many things were flourishing under the Islam at the time, and then things changed, and then we're not going to get into the history of Islam in the Middle East, but they were using that narrative to
the contributions have been lost. I still believe that, a lot of the things we have today are a result of a thriving, Muslim communities looking into areas that the West hadn't quite, were far behind. So there was a period like that.
So that's what makes it so appealing, right, to these narratives, that they do have big parts of truth. Right?
Oh, yeah. That's the thing.
On top of
that, they a lot of what they say, like we have this 90-10 truth. Like a lot of what they say is positive and good and attractive, and then the last bit is, but it's, we have to have the blame game. Well, it's because of these people, and they have to have a group of people who they hate or blame for all of the, the problems in the world. So
Yeah.
any hate group will have that pattern. They're attracted by a lot of the things, and then there's something that they do which isn't quite, doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah. But I wonder, like, if before them, some similar Hindu group would find you, doesn't have to be extremists, but some who also give you community and purpose, would you maybe go that path? Or like, was it more of a timing, or was it really just appealing narrative?
I think it was just, for me, is when you're young, you're doing all these things. You've just entered the world, and and it's all, everything's so bright and dim and confusing as
Uh,
well. If you imagine just being like 19, you're just like, you're confused and you are trying to find your place. I knew what I cared about, so that was a good start. This is what I care about. This is what I want to do, and using that passion is what, that for me. I later realized that that's what they were using of mine. This is my passion, and you know, um, my desires to do this type of work. They were using it because that's an energy, isn't it, that people want to use. If you're just sitting there, they're not going to get popular. But if you have people like me, and there's lots of people who care, champion their agenda.
it's interesting because I do a lot of work with people between, let's say, 20 and 30, and many of them have this necessity to find and understand their purpose. Actually, I just had a conversation with one young man, and they have necessity to belong and matter. And then different organizations can come along and offer a compelling narrative, and maybe you'll get. And then there are different paths depending on which organization you end up
The
joining.
timing, and it is
Yeah.
an if there's a gap or the void or a frustration,
Mm.
and no one, you're just not being heard, and then someone comes along and says, I hear you, I feel this.
Mm.
It feels like, oh, someone's here, someone's listening. And it has this calming effect on you, because you think you're not alone in this,
You're not crazy,
yeah,
but
you're
it's
not crazy.
amazing.
Why is it just me that cares about what's happening in
Yeah.
Kosovo and Palestine, and why is it only me that wants to do something? And then people like, no, this is what you do, and they offer this solution, and you're like, you go with it. It sounds great. Let's go with this. I'm up for, doing non-violent takeover of these places and implementing something more just.
I wanted to highlight this because I want people to hear that. Hey, I want to listen to you. I'm going to validate the way you feel, and here's the place to belong. That that can be used that can end up in many different ways. It's
Many, yeah, you see
right.
that, and it's all patterns. As I said, like they'll say some like really
Yeah.
great things, but then there's a 10% of like, whoa, that you need to step back by, if you find out what that is. And I go into schools, and I go, I've taught thousands of students around what extremism looks like, and how to be careful, and how to safeguard yourself from it, especially online stuff now. Like before, it was people coming up to you. Now it's just at your fingertips. Anyone can go down a rabbit hole and go into like these dangerous ideologies, whether that's misogyny, and like young men thinking, there's no prospects, there's no hope for me. And then somebody like a misogynist like influencer could come and say, well, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and this is the problem, women are the problem. Or white supremacy groups, well, you've got no job because of the migrants. It's not new, and it's kind of basic.
The
That is,
oldest trick in the book, right? Hey, you have
yeah,
a problem, and then I come along and say, hey, I hear you. You're not crazy, and there are others with your problem. And by the way, it's not you, it's them.
yeah, it's them. And you're like, who the hell's them? But them sounds good. I can go with that
Yeah.
because it's an answer.
Uh,
So, that's from this study and knowledge, we've looked at it inside out, back to front, upside down. We know what this looks like. And this is where my frustration has, like, this is why I go into schools, like, we know what this looks like. And I just saying knowledge is power. People cannot take you for a ride if you know the tricks. You need to
Yeah.
show up the devil in his full form and say, this is what it looks like, guys. Don't be fooled. It's happening continuously online, whether, they're all scams, aren't they? It's kind of, I just see it as a type of a scam. But, at the time, I really believed this was a solution. And then it was, then I became a bit older and wiser and realized maybe it's not that black and white.
So let's go there. I would love to hear. I know that, well, you managed to get out, but how did that happen? What kind of realization, what changed for you to decide to leave?
Well, again, I was starting to see all the flaws in this, this I once upon a time thought was absolutely perfect, foolproof way of going forward. And then I was like, actually, a lot of these people seem a bit arrogant. They don't seem to actually care. They seem more about their ego. And, I was kind
What
of...
did you see? That'll be interesting maybe for people to hear while you were part of that movement or that organization. Like, what did you see? How did your day-to-day change? Maybe portray that picture a little bit before we go how you left it.
Yeah, I was just interested in spreading the good word. This is what, I believed was part of my faith, and, going into universities where I was recruited at university, and a real belief that I was doing something wholesome, and this was going to change the situation of the Muslims that's so dire, and we can stop them from being killed. And we'd have a group of people that would meet, every week. We were very committed, and it was very organized. It wasn't these things and again, with this knowledge, I'm going we'll talk later about like what I've done with this information. So it's like you can't change something you don't know. So I learned you've got to be organized, you have to have a system, you have to be consistent, you have to be persistent, and you have to have all of these qualities if you want to spread an ideology. If you want to spread something, you have to have all of these things. And I saw it, I lived it, I breathed it, I was part of it. And now, thank you very much, I have that knowledge, and I'm going to do something with it, which is what I'm doing now. But yeah, before we get to that, that's, just an insight is I saw this everyday life, all the ins and outs of how this can work and how we can challenge it once and for all.
What is something, while you were, I'm just wondering, I'm curious, why you were inside. So you said you were committed, you met weekly. What was something interesting that our listeners would find, so this is how it works. This is what makes it effective, because it is effective in many ways, right? Besides the narrative, appealing narrative that has big parts of the truth, and on top of that, things that they say they care about, but maybe they just co-opt you. But what makes it work so efficiently at the end?
So there's a purpose. You know why you're there. You're trying to change the situation of the people. You have a motivation, which, they steal people's passion around their faith, because that's a very, very strong emotion. So they'll take that. Then they will, they'll give you, a membership to an exclusive club. Like, you are part of this exclusive club now.
I feel special.
You're special. You're going to be doing this. Not everyone does this. And your faith requires it. God wants you to do this. That's powerful.
So they really, at one point, I remember you said, I'm quoting you, they were taking advantage of my faith, passion, and desire to change the world, and fit that into their political agenda, which was trying to make other people's, others' enemy, and to drive whatever they wanted to achieve.
Yeah, so that's exactly, so all of these things are positive things that I was giving, and they saw that and utilized it for their own gain.
So let's talk about then, how did you manage to leave? Because, as we just talked about, because they were leveraging these deeply human needs to belong, to matter, to have purpose. When did you realize this is not for me?
Yeah, I said, starting to see some flaws, and I didn't, at one point I was like, this is the true way to get things done and to make a change. And then I saw the people was just quite egotistic, and starting to see unpleasant parts of it, and then starting to see, oh, maybe this is not as straightforward as I once believed in my teens, and I'm getting in my late 20s now, and thinking mid to late 20s, and I was like, no, I don't think I'm feeling this. And then I saw the 7/7 bombings happen, and I was like, no, I really do
That was
not.
2005 in London.
I was like, this is not what I want to put my name to anymore. I do not feel this. I do not feel that this is going to achieve what I once believed it would, because it was an act of violence, and to a level where I just, this is in my home as well, so it had more of an impact. And then I knew the backlash for the Muslim communities. I was like, that's just going to make it worse. This is just a disaster. And they're using Palestine, Israel, all these things as an excuse. And I was like, oh my God, that's what they told me as well. So I was like, this is something that they're using to aggravate people to do these type. I was an advocate for a change of government, for an Islamic State, whereas they were just drawn to kill a whole load of innocent people. So I was just, it all started to come quite clear, like coming out of a coma almost, like, oh my gosh, what have I been doing? Like, that is not. So
Can you take us to that moment? Was there like a moment where you decided, okay, I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to tell them, or how did that happen? Like, take us to that place.
Yeah, I just, I just had my little baby, and I was just like, I really don't want to do this anymore. I just, went to the elders, as it were. And it was like, there's a hierarchy in this organization, and that's what makes it quite appealing as well, because you have to be in with, it's a bit secret and all that stuff. That makes it exciting. And I just went to them and said, I don't really want to be part of this anymore. And I offered a different solution. I was like, what if we did it like this? I can't remember what I said, but
I tried to bargain a little bit.
Yeah, I was like, what if we didn't do this completely? But I don't know, I just didn't toe the line. It was completely like, oh, and they were like, oh, she's not toeing the line. She's thinking completely opposite. So we need to get rid of her. So yeah.
Was it dangerous to do that?
I didn't really think about it at the time. I do things and think about them afterwards. I think that's my pattern. I need to think a little bit more ahead. But no, I just thought this is what I want to do. And then I just got let go, like, oh, you can't be part of the group anymore. I was like, okay. It didn't particularly upset me. I just thought, yeah, that's a good timing.
You know what I'm hearing as I'm listening to your amazing story is that when you're young, there's so much uncertainty and you don't know what to think, and you have some ideas about the world, but then you meet someone or some organization that gives you tremendous moral clarity. This is the way, and then uncertainty kind of melts down a little bit, right? So you feel, as you said, you feel heard, but then it sounds like the born of new life, and I completely can see that. My story is not your story, but I remember when my first daughter was born, I was completely changed person. That was a whole new sense of clarity for me, and it sounds like that gave you another set of more clarity that, hey, this is exactly what I don't want.
Yeah, that's like, I wasn't I was advocating. I was upset because of the violence that I saw, and I was like, then this violence isn't what I was, advocating at all. And to have that mix, even now people are like, oh, were you terror? I was like, no, I was not. I was a political, religious Islamist. I wasn't, violent. And that's what put me off. Like, this is not, I don't ever want my narrative to be mixed with that in any way. But then I was like, it's going to be inevitable, because they took from the same hymn sheet in a way. And so I was like, I knew something had to change. I was like, it's definitely not this. And I'm like, I've got to find a new, let's get back to square one. What do I do now? And then that took a while to build as well.
So let's talk about that, because you've spoken about the emotional burden, and even you've spoken about some guilt of your past involvement. How did you manage to pass that emotional burden
Oh, the
when you
emotion.
left.
Yeah.
And how do you process these feelings of leaving some, because you saw 2005, some people got hurt.
Yeah.
Even though you
Yeah.
didn't obviously advocate, you talk about there was some emotional burden to
The
process.
burden. Yeah. The
Yeah.
burden. Yeah. I did feel, I was like, okay, oops. Like, I spent a lot of my time doing this. How do I change that? How do I change that around? Like, what do I do now? Like, okay, um, that was the wrong way. And, I'm not proud of the things that I was speaking about, how I was speaking about them. The causes I still believe in, but how I was speaking about them wasn't correct. So I was like, I had to like process everything. Like, why was I drawn to this? What's happened? How was I taken advantage of? Why did I not see it? All these things. Um, and I started to like think of, a way forward. Like, how do I utilize this knowledge for good and transmute that into something positive? I would not be able to do what I do now, obviously, if I didn't have that knowledge. And, it was like, do you feel guilty? I was like, yeah, but doesn't everyone I'm not making excuses, but people make mistakes in their lives, like all the time. And as long as we're learning from them and we fess up to them and say, yeah, I did this thing, wasn't great. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it was just, I saw this and I wanted to do something about it. And I did, I'm not sure you're aware about the work that I do, but bringing people out. You are aware of that.
Of course, yeah.
People out. So it was knowledge that I acquired, not purposefully. It was just people's lives. And they go through that, and I'm able to utilize it for something good. And I guess that's what my driving passion will be until I die.
And that's amazing. But I also want to I'm just very curious about, because that's transition from you left one community that gave you some sense of purpose that you started obviously doubting, and then you left it. And I wonder, what did it take for you to reintegrate? Like you probably did you have to face your friends, family, literally you said rebuild your life. And I'm curious about this because I believe many people can learn from, hey, how do I rebuild my life from something that I want to move away from? Or how do I have probably had to have many difficult conversations with yourself and others. What does it take?
Well, so you just, after all those years, you just lose your support network and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm on my own. But I guess I learned something about myself. I was just like, I'm actually interested in doing what's true for me. I'm not, I can build another community. I can make more friends. I'm still me. I've just left that behind. And it's I guess like a test of your character and strength. And, I was still a little bit lost. And, it's probably in this mindset when, like when I'm thinking back, like, oh my God, I used to say these things and talk like this and it's a bit embarrassing, like, like that mindset. But yeah, I was just someone who just thought just moving forward with, again, what I believed in. And I had small children, so I was like working as a mother and doing the household things, and I had other sets of friends, and I was fine. I mean, I lost some very good friends that I'd not spoken to for very many years, but it wasn't the end of the world for me.
So let's build on that, because what I really admire about your life and your work right now is that you decided to share, and your name means gift in Arabic, right? Hadiya. So you decided to gift the world your experience, honestly, which is not easy, right? And speak about it, and then it must be very hard in order to maybe enable other young people not to choose the path that they might regret tomorrow. So why don't you tell us? It would be really cool to learn more about how do you do that? What kind of work do you do today to enable young people particularly, right? But
Yeah.
also others, uh, to choose the path that they might not regret. And I'm not saying it's almost impossible in the age of 20 to choose the path. You're going to have some regrets in life. It's
Yeah.
impossible to be perfect. You're gonna make mistakes. But going back to this, yeah, what do you do today, and how do you enable people not to make these choices? How do you teach them not to buy into these narratives? They're very compelling, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess when I left I was just right, what do I do now? How do I again utilize this knowledge? And I was like kind of made a vow. I was like, if I was to speak to my 19-year-old self, what would I say
Uh,
to her? And I'm going to say that to every single young person in the world, if I could. Like, guys, you don't want to do that because, and then, you know, just give them some advice. Like, this is not what you want to do, and to redirect their, you know, their souls and their energies into something more positive because they want to do something. And I'm like, you know, if I was nice, you want to do something, you want to change the world, but this is not how you do it. This is this might seem like a sensible thing, but you know, this is what you need to look at, all of these other factors. And um you know, look at humanity, look at, you know, people as people. We're complex beings, but we're quite magnificent as well. And if we all put our energies together, we can create something quite beautiful. It doesn't have to be all this hatred and doom and gloom and drainage. Like, it's just, you know, being in that state, you're just drained and unhappy all the time. And like, does it have to be this way? You know, like we could maybe do it in a positive way. And so yeah, I said, like, it so happened that I put this intention out, and then a lot of young girls that were joining ISIS were coming to see me, and I had the responsibility of pulling them out. So when I said I want to do this, that's exactly what happened. Um, and then, you know,
so how do you talk to them? What do you tell them?
it's just like as if I was talking to myself. Like when I was 19, I was like, you know what, I get you, hear what you're saying. I'm not going to poo-poo your emotions. What you're seeing on TV is atrocious and extremely sad, and that is a given. But what do you want to do with that? Do you want to get more angry, or do you want to use it to call for, you know, change in the world's only ever been made through, you know, peaceful protests in that sense. Like the violence has just led to nothing. Um, you just need to feel that sadness, but not put out more sadness in the world as a result of your sadness.
How do they
Try.
react when you talk to them, when you tell them this? Because you basically lay down the path. Hey, I get you because this is the narrative I lived in. I feel uh, 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 the same pain that you're seeing in the world, and here's how I ended up for me. What did they tell you? What did they say back?
No, they respect what I have to say because I've already given them a space. Like, I'm not judging you. I'm not saying this is,
That's
you know,
really
I'm
big
not
one, right?
judging you. You know, you can either listen to me or not. I'm not going to preach, but listen and listen to an alternative because there is one. And I'm going to offer you that alternative today, or, you know, however long it takes. And yeah, that's what people want. They want solutions. And if we're just cutting the you know, conversation, then they will look for other places and other doors to see who is listening. So you know, our organization is about being that alternative, you know, presence for as a solution for young people, and saying, you know, just look at your own environment, your own community, and give back to what you can change. You can't change Palestine. You can't change these places. You don't live there. You live here. This is what you can do.
Mhm.
No, be
You
realistic.
anchor them in their own community. That's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. That's
That's very interesting.
like, and it's part of the faith as well. If they like, you know, love thy neighbor, you're not allowed to sleep at night Islamically if you know your neighbor's hungry. Like, these are
Yeah.
responsibilities that you need to take on. They're part of your faith. Instead of going around the, you know, part of the world that you don't know and trying to protect someone you know, you're never going to be able to. But you can do this. And actually, if everyone did this in their own environment, we'd actually be okay. If everyone tended to their own gardens and looked
Yeah.
after their own flowers and, grass, and we'd actually live in a nice place. And that's not impossible to do. So that's pretty much the premise of our organization. It's all like local.
And that's amazing. I want to go a bit deeper to that, but just I want to acknowledge how much I love this idea of not judging, listening to them, and it must feel empowering for them because you're giving them choice. You're not making choice for them. You're not bullying them into choice. You're not making them feel guilty, but like, hey, I respect your passion. I'm validating the injustices you see, and here's another path you could choose.
Yeah.
And I find that so interesting. And then another thing, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking as an activist myself, work with activists, like the passion and the values and necessity for justice is something to admire. And if you redirect these people towards constructive activism, they can do so much good because the passion and the values are there. Just you're literally saving them from being co-opted by someone else's agenda who hijacks their passion and values and uses them for their personal goals mostly. So yeah, no, that's so valuable. It's amazing. And the organization you keep talking about, Vona, it's called the Groundswell Project. So tell us more about that. Like you said, you become alternative. Are you building community there? Because very often I tell people, I know many people who went through addiction crisis, or people who also went through a similar story to yours from some other parts of the world. And what keeps coming up is this idea that if you are, even if you're alcoholic or if you join a particular group, it's a community and a way of life. And it needs to be replaced with another community and way of life. That's why very often people who are addicted to alcohol, for example, they end up becoming very religious. And it's not about religion itself, it's about the community they find within the religion, right? And I've seen that a lot in my country, for example. But yeah, how do you guys do it? How do you redirect them? You talk to them and then?
Well, the whole, again, it's like this, what did I learn in those years? And how do I utilize this knowledge and put it in a package and make it into a thing? And so, this whole world isn't just, oh, you do training or you do this and you do that. There are many moving parts to all of it. And for me, if we don't approach it in a holistic manner, there's no way of solving, because I'm interested in trying to solve the issue. And I think you have to do it in many, many different forms. So as I said, if you look at, how extremists work, you have to work in the same way. It's like for like, isn't it? Like if it's a virus of hatred, any virus in nature, viruses kill people, don't they? And hatred has killed people. So this virus has to be, when you have COVID, you have to have a bit of COVID in your body to fight the COVID. Like this is what happens. You have to have the same dose. And so I looked at how these guys operate and how can I do the complete opposite. So, and that's really basic. Can
you give us an example, maybe like a case? I know you also work with not only Islamist extremists but also with white nationalists. But it'd be interesting if you give us like a little journey of like, hey, there was this person that was on this side, and then this is how we enable them to leave.
So I guess before I was saying, what do extremists do first? Because you have to know what they're doing, and then you can challenge it, and then work around them. But if they do those three things, I always say is they're dividing continuously. So they're look at those people who don't look like you, they've got different religion to you, they're different, so they're dividing, and then they are preying on those vulnerable people, like you said, alcoholism and people in debt, people in loneliness. They're all very susceptible to joining these types of organizations, let's face it. And then they also have this fantastic ability to promote hatred very well and misinformation. So if they do those three things where they divide, we're interested in uniting communities. And then if they are preying on individuals, we've developed an app that you can find support and help if you're going through problems. and then when they um, when they are amplifying hatred and misinformation and fake news, we amplify positive things that are happening in the community. So with that in mind, I will go to a person. I've been to people and saying, this is what they're doing. You're being tricked. They're dividing and they're taking advantage of you, and all of this fake news is happening. But why don't you come along and see how people are working together, how Muslims and Jews are uniting to talk about Israel and Palestine, because it's a humanitarian, horrible issue and they're not divided. Whereas you're being told by the extremist views that they're being divided, but I'm showing you that they're not divided. Then I'll show them how, your vulnerability, you have they've got potential mental health issues, or they're from, deprived background sometimes, or they're in care. So this is see how they've manipulated your weakness. Like any virus, when you're feeling weak, it will get you. And this is your weakness. So I show them what's happening. I give them the story. And then I was like, it's not all doom and gloom. They've put all of this nasty information out there, but look at all this positive stuff. Did you know this was happening? Hindus and Muslims are breaking bread, and this some positive stories that are happening in their local community. That breaks that stereotype. So then you kind of cut up the oxygen to extremist narratives. So the people that I've spoken to, just you have to show that alternative, and then they start seeing a different thing. Because if they're always seeing the one thing, and they get into that pattern and the algorithms that they're always watching, especially now online, you just pull them out and you show them the absolute opposite. It does have a huge impact on their mindset. Because they've never really been shown anything positive before. It's all darkness. It's all darkness. And if you can show some bit of light, it has this very, very profound effect on the individuals.
It sounds like they're constantly scared in the fight or flight mode because they're exposed to the darkness, and what you do to them, you kind of calm them down. Like, hey, you show them a little bit of hope, and then you build it from there.
Lot of hope, and also the hope within themselves, like what they contain. Don't underestimate your own power. It's very we are powerful as human beings, and if you actually just nurtured that, you'll be surprised at what you can achieve. So a lot of it is cheerleading young people on and giving them the aspiration that they have what it takes. What do you want to bring to the world? They're not told that they're valuable. They're like, what do you mean I'm valuable? Like, you are valuable. You're very human life is valuable. For why? For what reason? Because you have so much to offer, and you're not, a lot of the kids from deprived backgrounds are not given that type of encouragement. And once they're given that, they can reach the sky, and but they've just never been, helped or encouraged in that way. So
you believe in them. You show them you believe in them.
Yeah.
Many of them never felt that, right?
No. Yeah.
I heard these stories so many times. But I want to get just a tiny bit political about what's currently happening right now in the world, particularly in the West, is this rise of far-right extremism, I would call it. And what are you seeing? Are there any parallels between your work? And I'm talking about the rise of many not democratic, quite extreme, very often anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, us against them type of a thing, especially in Europe. We're talking here, and you're in Europe. What are you seeing? Are you seeing any patterns? How do you explain that? Everybody's worried about that.
Yeah, there are exact patterns. It's the same for me. I don't even label it all. It's all nasty hatred coming from whether you're white or you're black or you're Muslim or you're Hindu. It's whatever's coming out of you right now is negative. And it's all the same in my view. And it's all working in the same way. And it has to be dealt in the same way. So this, the people that I've spoken to are from white supremacy groups as well. I just treat them exactly like I speak with people who were from ISIS, who were joining Islamist organizations. And again, listen to them, hear them out, and speak to them and give them that alternative. If you look at what's happening today, it's inevitable it's going to happen, this type of polarization, because it's all done on social media, which we know you have to keep saying more and more outrageous things to be heard and get likes. And so it's just platforms for just being outrageous. And it's not really what mainstream people think. But then you start to worry that maybe it's starting to affect mainstream now. And that we do live on the online world. Our children live on the online world. That's one of the biggest, problems of today, that they don't live climbing trees and, going out with their friends. They're on their phone 24/7, like an addiction. And this is having a huge impact on their mental health, on their ability to understand different nuances, with the algorithms giving them the same old, things. It's problematic. So again, knowledge is power. We go to the children and say, this is what's happening to you. Are you aware of this thing happening to you? And, and a lot of them respond so well. They're like, they're starting to see, oh yeah, this is an addiction. And they're starting to feel like
addiction. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is something that is not good. But again, it's the money will come the more addicted they are. So again, this is controlling your power, because your time is spent doing this when you could be doing something more positive in your community. And actually, if you do something more positive in your community, you'll have better mental health.
Yeah.
And these types of educations that we're trying to show young people.
It sounds like what's happening right now is what happened to you when you joined that organization. That they offered compelling narrative, and here's the evidence. Now online, that happens at scale, because people are in echo chambers. Here's the evidence of everything going to crap. Everything you care about is disappearing. And here's the answer. Join us and we'll tell you what to do. And here's the community. And now that's scaled, right? That narrative that captured you is now on steroids.
Yeah. And it's emotional, because everyone is, it's people's emotions that are being affected, that you are going to disappear as a race of people. What do you mean we're going to disappear? The fear is there. And, you are they're trying to destroy all of Islam. You're like, oh, what do you mean? So all these fear narratives, like you said, on steroids, on speed, and they just, but they can't get anywhere if we are shielded from them. That's what I try to promote as well. Like, know thine enemy, that's an old saying, know thy enemy.
And fight narrative with narrative. But I just want to underline this, how important it is to understand fear. Because when they show you all these, as you said, darkness, here's the reality that's selected only for you to make you upset and fearful. In that state, even your brain, the way your brain functions, you become very susceptible to manipulation. Because think about it, whenever you're in fear, you're like, okay, I need protection. And the more I make you fearful, the more you're ready to seek that protection from some kind of authority or community that I'm offering. Hey, look, fear. And here's the solution. I'll save you. And like, okay, yeah. That fear, and we talk a lot about leadership, that fear-led leadership always leads to the dark side. And the end of that path, no one wins. It's just, we've done it. It's the oldest trick in the book. Like, I'm going to create the fear, and I'm going to save you from it.
For it every time. There's something wrong with us. We keep falling for it. But I'm just going to quickly just talk about our that thing is
Please, yes.
This is our kindness map as it's an app. Basically, like you just said, is like, okay, not this fear. What's the positive? And the map, basically, it's like a yellow pages we have. In the US you have yellow pages as well, don't you?
Yeah.
For charities. So when I go into the schools, when I'm speaking to my 19-year-old selves en masse, I'm like, hey, you know what? Why don't you go and volunteer at your local refugee organization, or the local football club, or the local, women's refuge, or there's so many beautiful things happening in your area. If you go and donate your time, you'll actually feel better, and you'll help your community group as well. And you'll be able to put it on your CV, and you'll get to know your community. And so we're putting this in colleges and trying to advocate that young people do like voluntary service locally and see how that actually impacts their mental health. And people have said, I volunteered at the food bank and I can't stop going because I feel better every week. Like I'm feeling really down. Then I go to the food bank and I volunteer and I feel 100 times better. And so many young people are starting to recognize that doing something a little bit not for themselves and getting and going out into the community is helping their whole like well-being instantly.
That's amazing. My friend and quite a known doctor in Serbia told me, if you want to feel better, go outside and help someone who can never help you back.
Yeah.
And just selflessly help. And that's what you're doing for them in a way. You're hey, here are alternative communities where you can do immediately something. And there's nothing that's curing fear and anxiety better than action. And then all people are seeking for is connection, purpose, that they matter,
Yeah.
that they do something and that's beautiful.
It's a win-win situation. They're like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
like we really rely on you to come every week because you can carry these big boxes to this thing. And they feel the purpose. And I'm not joking. It is a huge cure for mental health. We are experimenting now with the health services. We're officially working with them to signpost depressed patients to the kindness map, and then
that's amazing.
Signposting them to like working with refugee organizations and people who've new to the country, taking them on walks, nature walks, doing community gardening. Like this is because this whole wave of the online world has made us forget that we're part of a community, and then lo and behold, we're all depressed and we're wondering why. We have to rediscover the fact that we're human beings that need to live in a community. Otherwise, we actually die. Like we will die. Loneliness as well is a killer. It kills people when you're not part of a community. So this is a healthy way of doing it. It's not rocket science. It's all on your doorstep. Guess what? You are the cure to your own, problems. And you don't need to have drugs or go down hate groups to feel better.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I just want to ask you before we finish, what is your dream?
My dream? Well, I guess
for yourself, for your work.
The work, obviously, because I put my whole energy and my whole self into it. And the dream would be to like map global compassion, because I work for the counterterrorism. I'm the chairwoman of the counterterrorism advisory group in Scotland Yard, and this heavy stuff where we map hatred all day long. And I was like, why are we not mapping compassion? Why are we not helping the people? And we're all human beings. This community that I have, in the part of the world I live, you'll have it in Zimbabwe or some other remote part. There's always going to be an equivalent of you in that community.
Yeah.
Wherever you are around the world, because we're all human beings and we all have the same issues. So, when we realize that, hopefully the sooner the better, but I'm going to try my best to try my bit and see what happens.
No, Hadiya, sounds like your work and the Groundswell project and this kindness map, it's a solution to so many things. Where people can find out more about your work, so that they want to learn more.
Yeah, you can go to our website, groundswellproject.org. All of our work's on our website, and you can download the Kindness app on App Store or Google, but it's all live, and you can start mapping your organization.
I'm doing it today.
Yeah, if you're doing some good work anywhere in the world, we want to see it on the map. You can just upload yourself, and we start organically growing compassion again.
That's a great invitation. Thank you so much, Hadiya. This was such a gift. I'm very grateful for your journey. I'm grateful that you shared it with us. And thank you for the work of creating spaces for people to have real, often difficult conversations that we really need to have, especially in these days where everything is polarized, it seems. And I believe that those kind of conversations and connection in the community, finding purpose within the community with the kindness and empathy at the core, could be just as simple. It could be, as you said, it's so simple, but yeah, it's so efficient. Sometimes the best solutions are just like that. Could cure all this polarization, dehumanization, and I would say global political crisis we have. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Nicola.